Hello, Fred.
Hello, Kristin. How are you?
I'm well. So excited to be here for episode two.
I know it's an exciting journey. And definitely, the first two ones are always going to be kind of like the birthing process of what all this fun stuff is going to be that we're going to play with.
Yeah, the feedback was great. So I appreciate anyone that responded and gave us feedback on the first episode. And that was really just an introduction. I think our goal will be to have a particular topic. Fred and I are very spontaneous in the way that we gather together for these chats. So whatever flows will be flowing. But today we had the idea to discuss fear.
Yeah, I think it's an important aspect if you look at it as half of our existence. I always talk about the simplicity of looking at everything as either a loving experience, something that feels good, or a fearful experience, something that feels bad. That it's half of the coin, that we really don't want to be afraid of our fear. Because when we're afraid of our fear, we're afraid and it keeps us away from half of our existence.
Yeah, we've heard so many quotes about fear, about what is it? Is it the Joseph Campbell one?
Or you
The,
mean the JFK, the
the
only thing fear
well, the
is,
JFK, yeah, let's go there. That one's even better.
it's always fun. It's a good time now that the whole political experience is happening like full force in our country. One of the famous JFK quotes is the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Yes.
And we've heard it countless times, and we hear it, we just kind of assume it to be true. And like, yeah, it makes sense. We want to be afraid of fear. But if you really break it down, I would want to rewrite his quote to be the only thing to love is fear itself.
Exactly.
Because,
Exactly.
yeah, go ahead.
Because loving everything, I mean, that's the work I do with emotions and healing, anything trapped in the body is you have to allow it to rise. I always use the analogy of like bringing an emotion to the dinner table and respecting it as a house guest, seeing it and loving it and just validating it in that way. So fear, the only thing to fear but fear itself is almost like a bypassing in my mind. It's not really being with it, it's just writing it off. And it doesn't even make sense when you pull it apart.
It's so true. When you like kind of dissect that statement, it's fascinating to think about fear. The only thing to fear is fear itself. But if you really want to understand what your fear is, and it kind of brings us back, is that we want to get into that still point state. We want to get into that state of balance to where we can see all aspects of our experiences. What would be the loving experience that could happen, and what would be the fearful experience that could happen? And realizing that, I think one of the simplest reasons why people incarnate on earth is to find love in the face of fear. And
Yes.
to me, that simple statement is just about finding the still point or the balance in every situation. Because if you can always find love in the face of fear, then you're going to be able to see everything. You're going to be able to actually have a choice versus our pre-programs, which are usually imbalanced with more fear than love. So most of the things that we're manifesting and creating is just a reflection of that deeper imbalance to where we believe fear exists more than love in this situation.
Yeah, the harmony of it. And I'm going back to what we talked about last week of, the eye of the needle. And I almost saw the eye of the needle. We've talked in the past, Fred and I, of the infinity symbol and the power of it, and say, you've got fear and you've got love, and then the still point being the intersection there, and what are your thoughts, Fred, on really just being in that space, say the eye of the needle with the infinity symbol, and knowing you've got the two yin and yang, of fear and love. What does it really mean to be in a place of maybe the observer or that still point?
That's a great question. And I love the infinity symbol because that's the perfect analogy of just traveling through where one half is love and one half is fear. And it's like we're on this eternal cycle, where we'll experience the bliss of love on one extreme and then it brings us back to that still point. And then we'll have these experiences, that are like the extreme of fear as well. And it's really just for me, it's about learning to be able to navigate through both emotions. So if we are really here to find love in the face of that fear, then we've got to be preloaded or programmed earlier on in our life, first 5 years where we don't consciously remember it, with programs that would be more fear than love.
Yes.
So as we're going through these experiences, it really is amazing if you look at fear a little bit differently. Is there's nothing to be afraid of with fear. At least I don't believe so. To me, fear is just like your 3-year-old self that's in pain.
Yes.
It's just a reflection of what we've been programmed and what our brain believes to be our truth, and what our heart, our cells of our body knows what it feels like to experience these programs.
Yeah, and I love that you said the 3-year-old self. I think more of even the 2-year-old, where the temper tantrums, the terrible twos. I don't think that child is afraid of fear at that point. They're just acting out. I've read a lot about animals in the wild. When they have an experience that's frightening, they immediately use their voice, or like they let it out. They don't trap any of it, so they just move through that whole emotion. And I don't think animals in the wild, they don't have the programming either, so it just shows you it's all the programming that creates the fear,
It's fascinating when we look at that, because, I mean, to me, there's a few ways that our unconscious programs that are imbalanced, more fear than love, try to get our conscious attention. So then we consciously understand the imbalance. So then we know what type of vibration or what frequency of love we need to bring to that fear in order to create that still point of balance. So if you have, and remember, just from a physics perspective, anything that's imbalanced eventually will cease to exist. I
Okay.
always use that analogy. Take those little weights off your tires, in your car, and drive that car for a while, and then you'll start to see and feel that imbalance. And eventually it will break apart. Part of your car is going to break because of that imbalanced energy. So if you look at all your unconscious programs, your experiences that we don't remember, that our brain and body have taken on as more fearful than loving, is the only way that those programs can really get our attention, because our programs, our fears want to be balanced. They want to be in that still point state. So they have to get our attention. And how they get our attention is creating things externally as a reflection of our programs, so then we can consciously see it. But if we're not aware of that process, then we become that reactionary person that believes that everything is happening to them. And we're not looking here to create victims. We want to empower people and enable people to be that creative force that they are, independently and not codependently.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime we're in that victim energy, you can stay there your whole life, you're not going to get out until you can at least get to a neutral place where you can see things clearly. And again, I've had experiences that it was like my deepest fears and I had to move through them. There was no stopping. You could see that train was going to go through it. And you do get through it breath by breath. You get through it. You get to the other side. And even what we went through in 2020 and until now, it's like there was a lot that we may have feared through that time, but now being on the other side, you can see how much it expanded you, you know? So again, it's just coming into balance.
2020 was a huge year for everyone. It was like a massive global worldwide experience. It's fascinating when you look at just how many people were impacted by the same thing in 2020. And it really, to me, that was like a massive reset, because what that did was it broke up everyone's schedules. People that worked 9 to 5 and did the same thing for years and years and years and just were repeating history. It stopped that cycle and it pushed people to be at home,
Hmm.
which you would think would be a great experience. And it can be a great experience. But even from like a chirological hand perspective, once I saw this, I'm like, this is going to be a shit show for a lot of other reasons. Is the brain, when it's at work and it's around people that are more social and not super close and comfortable with, the brain is running through a different set of programs. It's not running through your childhood traumas. So now you've taken a person that had 40 plus hours a week of their life where they're put into a safer place to where they're not always processing their traumas. And you've taken that away, and now they're at home 24/7. So now their brain's running through all their childhood experiences. So
There's
it's
no escaping.
there was no escaping it, and it was perfect if you look at the bigger picture. So if we're here to balance and bring love to our fears, guess what? Our fears need to be presented and be seen for that energy. In 2020, man, it shifted things for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Also, then you have all of the fear that the media and everyone else was bringing and laying on top of that. So it really is like a perfect scenario. If you want to find out what your fears are, put yourself in fearful situations. Not consciously jump into fearful situations, but that's what we create in our life in order for us to see that imbalance. And 2020 ripped it open for a lot of people.
I love it. And what's happening as you're just talking is I'm bringing that quote back. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. And I think now we can take that quote that we've had this discussion, and now I see why it was created, because we see that it's really our beliefs and our thoughts, which we hear create our reality, which is what creates the problem. And what I've been really working with is, every day just seeing everything we're supposed to be afraid of pop up, whether it's on social media or just in conversations I have with people. And, oh, did you hear? This is the latest thing that you should avoid. And so, just personally navigating by saying, okay, well, if I don't believe that, what will the outcome be? Right. So, what are your thoughts, Fred, on our beliefs alone, which we've heard many people say create our reality, using them to reclaim our power?
That's important. So in order for us to reclaim our power and get back to that still point, to where we want to be in that space to where everything is in a balanced space, where everything is equal love, equal fear. We can see both aspects, we can see both choices. Really, that's the only time in our conscious existence where we have what I would call the illusion of free will, which is to then we have a choice that we can pick the loving experience or we could pick the fearful experience. And if we had a choice, why would we ever choose the fearful experience? And I think the deeper reason why we repeat cycles and keep recreating the same fear just through a different time, different place, different detail is because we don't see the loving side of that scenario. We haven't understood that in a deeper sense as to what is the purpose. Every single thing on this planet has both a loving and a fearful experience that's potential. But if we're only programmed with fear, and then the only thing that we can create is fear, it's not much of a choice to the conscious mind. It's like, oh, I have to go through this again. Or you just distract yourself, which a lot of people will do, or just ignore it and just repress it. And then it just gets louder. Then it becomes that 2-year-old, the terrible two, which is that 2-year-old self inside of you that's holding on to this program that's fear, not love, that just keeps screaming louder, kicking, throwing, whatever tantrums it does, but it's trying to get your attention. So that's why it really comes back into that, that statement is the only thing to love is fear itself. Because love's there. We know what that love can feel like. It's just sometimes when we can't find it or we can't create it to recognize it, that's where the frustrations come in play. And that's where we want to be the most conscious and be able to step back, look at the scenario, witness it as what's going on in this physical body, not to this physical body, then see what the purpose of that fearful experience was. Like, what could be the loving experience associated with abuse in childhood? And that really digs in to some deeper psychology of being able to see both sides of the situation. Once we see both sides, then we actually have a choice.
And that's that's a great point you make. When we have bad things happen to us, being able to look at them from an empowered stance. And I know from my own life, like I wouldn't trade anything. I went through a lot in my life. When my mom passed away, of course I want her here. I would love to have her here, but that was the start of my awakening in 2013, where I was just determined to find out what happens after we die, and it just changed everything, and it shifted my behavior and the way I interacted with the world. So, I think what you share, it is the fact that we can see at the still point we have a choice. We are at a neutral place, and we can love the fear because the fear is the comparison to joy or everything we really desire. We can't really see what we desire unless we have the fear in contrast.
That's important to understand. The purpose of fear is to show us that contrast, because I know, like, in there you've got these like groups of people, especially like in spiritual communities, where you see some of these people that are like the love and light everything, like they only want to focus on love and light, which I get that that's the answer to bring the balance. But the challenge is, as long as you're not just focusing on love and light because you're afraid of your fears, when you think the fear is fear itself, because if that's what's going on, you are just as imbalanced as a person that's focusing all on their fears and not on the loving experiences that they can have in every moment of every day. So it's about finding that balance and not just focusing on one or the other, and not judging fear as bad and love is good, because then that once again creates separation and division within us, where we're trying to bring this unity and bring everything back to that still point.
And that brings up, the fact that we can't judge anyone as being lesser. So I know, I've had some relationships in my life where, it's just been triggering. And there's been people that have been polar opposites to me, and it can bring up a lot. But the loving of those people and seeing that they're our greatest teachers, right? And bringing us back to unity, because a lot of people are waiting for the solar flash or the big event that's going to bring us into the new, better world. But it's really just coming back into unity, which is the still point. And you know, I I could go on, but like, what's your thoughts around all of that for changing our future?
I think that whole solar flash thing, where everything would just reset, technically to me, solar flash would be like, that's the still point. That's bringing in that balance of energy. The only challenge I have with that perception is, we didn't incarnate in here to wait for something to come and save us and shift it for us. It needs to be a choice, or else we don't truly learn what the purpose of that experience was. So, not saying that we need to have fearful experiences to understand loving experiences, but in a way we do. Imagine if everything that you ever wanted in your life, from every moment and choice decision, that we could just choose love, 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 create all these loving experiences, always get what we want. Imagine, I mean, don't get me wrong, it would be fascinating to have that for a period of time, but it would get boring.
Yeah.
It would totally get boring after a while.
And that is what I've read as the descent of our planet. We were in that higher vibrational place where we wanted to dabble with fear, and then we brought that in a little too much. We tipped the scales, and I mean, essentially, let's just be real. We incarnated on a hellish planet, I feel, like it's pretty insane what we've had to navigate to get to a neutral place where we can find our power again. I mean, we came in with amnesia, we forgot everything. And now we're just simply remembering who we are with all this other stuff that's happening in the world. And, you and I have talked about the need for all systems to break down, and there's a lot ahead of us. So it's going to be the still point and really finding and reclaiming our power within to navigate this.
You nailed that with the earth being hell thing. I always said that earth is hell. This is where fear, like, to me, earth is like fear school. Like, we chose to incarnate on earth because the density of earth is where fear resides for now. Earth is trying to ascend just like we are as well. So there's this co-creative process where we can be co-creating with earth to create more of a balanced experience or utopian experience. And utopian to me isn't all love. It's all everything. And you can choose to create fear, you can choose to create love. It's just you would continue to choose the loving experiences, but knowing that fear is always an option. And
Yes.
that's brings the still point and the balance of energy in it, I think, for sure. And what we're going through now is realizing it may get worse before it gets better, kind of thing, especially with the breaking down of systems, because we know the way things are going, most people don't want to continue this process. We just don't know what the answer or the solution is. So if you have a collective consciousness of humanity that is holding on to the past, and not wanting to transition or fearing what's coming in the future, if that needs to break in order for those beings to see the fear, that fear needs to get louder for them.
Yes.
And that's the challenging energy to us, is that we can see these parts of the bigger picture, not knowing everything, of course, but knowing enough to understand the bigger process, is we can see what needs to happen for the bulk of the people on this planet to really shift their existence to look at things differently. We're looking at things differently, but it's hard to move an elephant.
Yeah.
It's so much energy in the collective, and that's also part of the fear, that's being brought in through media and all this other things. Depending upon when you were brought up or how old you are, I can tell you the biggest thing that really implemented a ton of fear: cell phones. Because now we have access to going on and looking at what 9 billion other people are experiencing on this planet and all their fearful capacities. And we get so drawn and sucked into it because we're watching it, but yet that energy is still impacting us, even though truly what other people experience on the planet have no impact or bearing on us directly unless we allow it to be.
And it's such a great example is times where I've gone away on a solo retreat or just, put that phone down, no source of any information coming in other than myself. There's nothing to fear, and that's a powerful place to be. There was definitely some sort of agenda bringing that into our lives because, now we've got everybody who wants, I'm grateful people want to have their voice again and they're an influencer on social media. But when you just scroll and see all of those, different beliefs that people have, it absolutely does impact your energy. And I know for myself, I'm trying to limit that because it's much better just kind of being within my own thoughts.
Yeah, even that itself can be challenging too at times, right? but
It's
if you
crazy.
but if you look at your thoughts as your unconscious trying to get your attention, because
Yes.
we're not in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are created by our unconscious interpretation of what we're perceiving based on where we've been. So our brain will give us this thought process just to let us know, hey, this is what aspect of your unconscious program that's in balance, probably more fear than love. This is what's being created. Besides what we're being seen, what we're manifesting is a reflection. Also, our thoughts are going to be a reflection of what our programs are. So it's not that we have to dig in and find all the fear. Believe me, the fear will find it when it's ready to
Finds
be,
you.
because we don't want to get hyper on the other end to where it's like, I just got to rip out all my fears right now, because a lot of people just want it to be resolved. But you can't force a 5-year-old to be 8. There is a time perspective that we have in this holographic existence of the matrix, to where things are already kind of preconceived and pre-done in a way. We're just going through the process of creating it. So there are certain aspects that, hey, time is just the illusion, but there is a perspective that we can't just rip everything out in one moment. We could, and maybe there's some miraculous situations where that's happened, but we also want to look at the opportunity to see what we can do just on a simple daily basis to find this balance.
And that is exactly what I was reflecting on yesterday is just, feeling your emotions as you're moving through it, doing the inner work. I have a lot of clients that come to me during or after tower moments and a series of tower moments. And that's exactly what can happen. It's almost like we're all being brought to the same place or foundation. And so if you're not consciously doing the work to release your emotions, to feel them, to be neutral, aware, and do some shadow work, you could have a lot of events popping up in your life, which are a gift essentially, but man, it takes a lot to get through that. So, we're all going to arrive at the same place, I believe, and our natural state, which is, love and light and,
Yeah.
just personal freedom. But all of it has to be cleared. And through this podcast, I know we hope to give you the skills and the tools to just do that work because it's not easy.
No, it's the life purpose, is what we've really come down here for, which is to be in that fear and not be afraid of it, not allow it to cripple us, even though most of our biology is hardwired to repel or to run from fear. I mean, look at our limbic systems, the fight or flight, but now it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. They have these different ways that people react to perceived life-threatening situations that aren't about focusing on it. It's more about running or rejecting it or running away from it. So
Mhm.
I think there's really some biological aspects. Our limbic system, our fight or flight system is one. And I also think our ego is another. I kind of call the limbic and the ego almost like vestigial organs, like appendix or tonsils. We're starting to see, we don't know what the purpose of these are, but we're starting to see that maybe they're not really needed anymore. But I
Mhm.
think maybe earlier on in the human experience, the ego and the fight or flight was necessary
Yes.
because we were in very different situations. We were living in nature. We needed to be aware of what was happening around us to where now we can control environments. We could live anywhere on the earth with a form of energy and we could be cold or hot or stable, to where we wouldn't be without that. So the opportunities for the fear to present themselves may be a little less limited, as I would say, versus before. But I'm really starting to see a big push in a lot of the work that I'm doing too, which is about dissoluting and breaking down the limbic systems and ego.
Mhm.
And ego to me is just that aspect of our unconscious mind that just doesn't like change. It's like you're still alive, even if it sucked, you're still alive. Just repeat it. It may be horrific, but you'll still be alive. So the
Yes.
yeah. So the ego is big on not liking change. And to me, by shrinking those energies down of the limbic system to get it to the point to where it's just there for true life or death situations and not allowing the ego to constantly be flooding us with fear because of don't change, don't change, don't change. We really want to be able to open that up and allow more freedom in our choices.
Absolutely. And I do a lot of like vagal reset work with my, clients and myself. And I just find, it's not just a mental thing. The body is showing you completely where organs are hard and tight. And, it's just unbelievable to me how that's just as important to release those and to get into your breath and soften. So, it's just not being aware of something. It goes into the body, as we store these fears. And that's essentially what creates the disease. It's dis-ease in the body that hardens. And we want to come back to a softer place, which is more in the still point.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, disease states, that's another way that our unconscious program is going to create something to get your attention.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, what I find is when it gets to a disease or disorder state, that person's been creating scenarios that have been reflecting of that imbalance of more fear than love. It just hasn't been loud enough to really fully get their attention, for them to consciously look at it, to find the love in that situation, to create that still point. So we're getting these hints all day long of what we're creating. But if we don't own what we create, then we're just going to believe it's happening to us. And
Mhm.
then we feel that we don't have a choice or an opportunity to change it. And to me, when a disease or disorder gets present in the biological body, that once again is all right, we got to get louder, where the tantrums weren't working. So now we have to impact them on a physical level. And most people, well, not most, I would say a lot of people won't really do anything until it becomes a physical issue in the body because they don't, that's where Western medicine is more of a reactionary process versus a proactive situation to where let's find it before it starts to create issues.
Yeah, and I've noticed that some people almost feel a relief when they get a diagnosis, and maybe on a subconscious level, it's bringing the attention they had desired. And just, again, what we can come back to is knowing that we can heal anything. And that's something we're not taught, but I am discovering this inner technology within us all to transmute and alchemize anything. And for me, it's very visual. I can see how that needs to be released and reworked and reset in the body. But again, to know that even something as a diagnosis that could be really frightening, you have the potential to heal that fully, and you have to have the belief. I think it's believe, behave, become, I've heard, and I love that 3-step process because that new belief will, or the sovereign belief will create new behavior, and you can become anything you desire. And that's the world we're entering now. It's not take your medication or just treat the symptoms. It's to heal at the level of cause.
That is so good because it's so true. I love that believe, behave, become, because that is basically how our brain is functioned, or wired to function. Is think about just a new skill. If could we create it to like a new 3D skill versus an emotion that sometimes can be challenging. Think about like riding a bike. The first time you ever got on a bike, it was horrific. You're trying to figure everything out. Can't even get your balance, let alone where the brakes and where the gears. And then eventually, the more that that's a belief, you believe it, you see it to exist, then your behaviors or your choices will start to allow the brain to see it and understand it on a deeper unconscious level.
Mhm.
And then when you get to that point to what was it, believe, behave, become, then you start to become to the point to where you can ride a bike with no hands. You can be doing other things while you're riding the bike, so you can see how the brain and the body just need to understand it, practice it, bring it into an unconscious level so then it flows. That's what we also want to do with everything, especially the way that we look at fear. I mean, if I don't get excited when fearful things come up, but whenever I'm able to pull back from the emotional reaction of a fearful experience, and see it for what it is, then I want to see it because I'm like, oh my God, thank you for showing me this, because I'm obviously not consciously aware of what that unconscious program is. And that's the biggest separation and division that we see in our existence, is conscious mind to unconscious program.
And I just got the visual of like the caterpillar to the butterfly, and the unconscious program being the caterpillar, and then the consciousness bringing to light the metamorphosis there. And then you become something like a butterfly is not the caterpillar attached with wings. It's a whole new being, right? And that's the power of fear. So if fear is at your doorstep, you can go through that metamorphosis, and become the butterfly, which can essentially be from crawling on the ground to flying,
It's a
So,
difference in experiences between a caterpillar and a butterfly. To me, caterpillar would represent more of what we would call like a fearful experience, because
mhm.
it's limited in its mobility. It can be more of a victim, easier to find, easier to get killed, eaten, whatever, versus a butterfly that may be a little bit more fragile, but it has more freedom in its ability to move different places. And it really, that's what we're constantly going through our life, is a metamorphosis of those experiences that we don't remember that creates these imbalanced programs, more fear than love. And then later in life, we're constantly recreating them to find them, to break them down, dissolute them, and then recreate that in optimal health, which is exactly what you said earlier. Is we have to realize if our body can create a disease state, then we obviously have to have the capacity to resolve that and to bring that into balance.
And how empowering is that? And I've seen it take place, and it's like a holy instant. If the client is ready, they can heal things instantly, and so it's really that belief and not having any doubt that it is possible. And we see in nature that metamorphosis process like all the time, we see it in the world. It's just a reflection available to us. It's just really knowing that this is the new reality that we're tapping into, which makes us infinite creators.
Absolutely. Think about how many times your cells in your body die and recreate themselves.
Exactly.
But yet, when we look at our body, we don't see it fall apart and come back together in that fraction of a second, because it doesn't all happen at once. But if every one of our cells died and recreated at the same time, we would literally like blink out and come back into experience. you know, which is more
Exactly.
the energy of creation and truth. So I really feel like that separation and division, the conscious to unconscious, is what creates that infinity energy of navigating through love and fear, so we can pick up little pieces and understanding to bring balance to other scenarios and programs in our life that we may not be aware of.
So do you want to lead our audience through an activity where we can like bring them into the still point with something that, maybe you have something that you're really afraid of right now? Just
I would
reflecting on
what
that.
what we can do, because we both are amazing, co-creators for sure. Everyone's an amazing co-creator. Your whole life has been co-created. You just haven't been consciously aware of it, but that doesn't negate the perception of your power of creation as that spark of divine energy that we all are as a soul. So what we could do though is, I'm thinking what maybe one of the best things to do for people is just to look a little bit maybe more at that limbic system. Like
Mm,
maybe our intention can be, as you're watching this and we go through a nice little quiet time, just to be all become the witnesses in our abilities to be able to look and see and watch our limbic system, that threshold, that level that triggers us. If we can start to increase that threshold to where most things in life won't put us into fight or flight. That
yes.
way we're able to shrink just the biological aspects of fear. And we can also intend to shrink down the ego. I
Mhm.
think that's really important, is to shrink these two things, and then also make sure that the cells of our body know that it is safe to experience fear.
Yes.
That the only thing to love is fear itself, and not have our cells that are afraid of fear, which will then put us in the fight or flight for something that's not truly life or death.
And I know our breath is a sign, if you're going through your day and you notice you're not breathing, you're like, experiencing shallow breath or holding your breath, that's a sign to always go deeper within and just notice, what are your thoughts at that moment? Just observe without any judgment.
That's so powerful. I always looked at breath very interestingly in a different way, because it's really our main interaction from
Mhm.
a sense perspective, in how we interact with this holographic existence is through breathing in to give us energy, and then we exhale whatever we no longer need. But then I always think of that quote from the Matrix, where Morpheus goes, "Do you think that's air you're breathing, or do you think that's oxygen you're breathing?" Then I'm, it comes back to that mind F a little bit, where it's like, I've never seen an oxygen molecule, but I've been told this is what happens. Does that mean it's true, or is that really true? Maybe our breath is something completely different than what we think it is. But you're right, breath is so important, because we have experienced some amazing things when we're able to control and focus on our breath.
Yeah, I've done some amazing meditations where my whole body just, it gets really tingly and it's just vibrating almost, like you can see it moving, and it's just from conscious breathing. And I've felt parts of my body completely heal, like pains that have just immediately left the body from breathing alone. And so there's such power in spending some time throughout the day, just paying attention, at least if you could do that, because the more you pay attention and observe without judgment, then you can change things. And then if you want to spend some time in breath work, and it could just be inhaling for a count of 4 and exhaling for a count of 6, it allows the letting go for a little longer than what you're taking in.
Breath work is so powerful. There's so many different ways that you can breathe, in different, intentional cyclical rhythms, to break up the unconscious breathing that's just naturally happening. And the reason why breath work really creates more of like the tingly feeling and also can bring balance in, has to do with DMT, believe it or not,
Okay.
is lungs produce the most DMT of any organ in the body. So when you're focusing on the lungs and you're consciously having your lungs breathe in a different format, it allows the lungs to be able to produce more DMT and flood it into your bloodstream. So then it almost becomes like a very mini, like ayahuasca journey,
Yes.
to where you can feel the body expanding and tingling. It
It's
allows,
wild.
oh my God, it can
And
be, and
then
that's
you're
the reason
just breathing, and it's like, what is that? Like the one time I was like, could have been frightened because I was like, it almost felt like a seizure, but like I knew it was a positive. It just felt so good.
maybe that's the truth of what breathing really is it's a tool to expand the unconscious conscious mind through natural, biology, that our body can produce more DMT, which allows us to be able to see past the veil, see more truths, and then that we can consciously remember it and bring it back when we're done with that breath work. So, oh my God, yeah, breath work is amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just intend just to go quiet for a little bit. Is that okay? If we can kind of do that. And the bigger intention is just going to be to adjust our limbic systems to have a purpose and a function that's truly life or death. We can get rid of and let go of some things that aren't really life or death that our brain's been used to seeing as such. And with that, what I found that really helps with the limbic system too is that, and the intention is going to be to block receptors on our cells for adrenaline and cortisol, because when we get into fight or flight, that's what the brain releases that puts us in that high alert state. So the more that people have been in fight or flight, look at the past 4 years, people have been in fight or flight just for leaving the house, and it's so our cells are so used to being fed. So we also want to intend is to block some of those receptors for adrenaline and cortisol in a relationship or a ratio that's going to be equal to the threshold increasing. So therefore, we don't have our cells of our body putting us into fight or flight just because it wants adrenaline and cortisol.
Makes sense.
And then also just watch that ego shrink. And the other thing I think that's fascinating with ego, it's so widely accepted, even in Western medicine and in therapy, but yet there's no aspect of the brain that they can define as the ego. So to me, that's kind of like that, that's like a gray zone area for Western medicine, is no one can show you where the ego is in the brain, but yet it's so widely accepted.
Wow, that's a great one to talk about on another podcast. That is huge.
Yeah.
It's something we all talk about and just operate like we have it, but do we really have it? It's
Just
wild.
like the only thing to fear is fear itself. We're like, yes, that makes sense. And then we don't
Get on board.
but we're like, what the hell are we just programming ourselves with? You know what I mean? It really is. It will decrease your limbic threshold, because now we'll be on heightened alert to be afraid of fear instead of loving the fear because it just wants to be balanced. It just wants to be healed. That your 2-year-old self just wants to be out. It's really that simple. So that'd be a good, nice little visual meditation or visualization if you want, which is just to imagine embracing your 2-year-old self, letting your 2-year-old self know that everything is fine, everything is okay, and that we can feel safe to be able to experience things in life, even if it is extremely fearful, but to know that we're safe to be able to experience and to be able to see the balance, the still point in that, which in turn will be able to bring in that beautiful unconscious balanced energy and then allow us to be able to see fear and love in everything. And then we can truly have a choice. Okay, so we're just going to go silent for a little. Well, I hope that felt good for everyone watching.
Yeah, it sure felt good for me. Just amazing. No, Fred and I will do a lot of that, just the two of us, and we often get the same visuals or the same feeling in the body. And I just felt so much peace and calm during that, and just noticing, you can just notice if there was a part of you that didn't, and just softening into that part of you and just allowing the safety to feel it. That's essentially how we let fear be experienced, just giving it a container to be seen. And that meditation's a beautiful way just to calm everything down, to reset so you're not in fight or flight all the time. And then you're more conscious about if something does appear in front of you that's fearful, you can maybe pause before reacting.
Absolutely. It's just like once you know it, like it's a believe, once we believe and understand what that whole process and what fear's purpose is, then our behaviors can change. We can now make different choices when fear presents itself, or we create the fear to present itself, to where we don't have to be in that reactionary state. We can just see it for what it is. And it just wants love to be balanced.
That's it. All at once.
It's so much easier, when you can understand it, but sometimes that's the hardest challenge, is when we're not aware and we don't take ownership for what we create. We really have to start to own our creations, especially the ones that don't feel good, that are fearful, because that's where the energy work, that's bringing that into the still point, bringing the love in to create that balance. Then it won't be so fearful next time. And so when you go through your sleep cycles and wake up tomorrow, if you're sleeping, which is a whole different topic.
Yes, it is. Oh, the clearing that takes place at night.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. So yeah, if you're all having issues or challenges with sleep, put some stuff in the comments, because I think it's happening a lot more than what people realize. It's not just isolated to ourselves. And that's one of the things I noticed, like even just yesterday, I was telling Kristin earlier, yesterday, I had 5 different people reach out to me to tell me how incredibly depressed they felt yesterday, Thursday.
It's a heavy day, heavy.
So when I see that coming in, like it's unsolicited, then I start to see these patterns, and I'm like, whoa, like it's really gaining intensity. It's getting louder. That 2-year-old is now like someone gave it a freaking drum, or something to beat on to make more noise just to get our attention. And that's what we're seeing on the world right now. We're a bunch of pissed off 2-year-olds.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yes. It's not going to go away for a little while. So we need to get used to it and find the still point so that we can reset.
There's not enough candy in the world right now to calm everyone.
It's true. I just see candy raining down. Just take it.
Jesus.
Yeah, you gotta laugh at times.
You've got to, or else you're going to cry, which isn't bad either. They're both releasing mechanisms, that's an unconscious energy. Either one doesn't matter. You're still releasing something. It's just so much more fun to laugh at an experience versus cry. Most of the sessions I'm in, like we end up like laughing at our traumas, because once you understand the purpose and you see the bigger picture, it's like, all right, okay, it's not as bad as what I may have consciously been thinking in a deeper level. So,
and that's the safety you bring to the session. And that's what I love. It's just like a permission slip, really, to enter this session with someone who really cares, who probably has navigated something similar, and you can just be you. I mean, I think that's what people just crave right now. And it's such an honor to be able to serve in that way.
oh my God, and I see the same thing with you too. Like we both have that energy of people feel safe and relaxed, and they can just almost like, just sink into their experience without being in that heightened state of what is this about, or I don't want to talk about this, or I don't want to look at, I'm afraid of my fears, that kind of energy. It really
Self-judgment and judgment of others, that people are just like, I see why it happens, but yeah, it doesn't have to be that way.
Judgment's a whole nother topic. Good Lord, that could be a whole podcast or two in itself.
It will be, absolutely.
Yeah, it's on the list. Our list keeps getting longer and longer. So We're just going to keep going with this each, every week or whenever we're able to get together and just put this energy out, this information out, and see where it kind of navigates.
It was fabulous. Thank you everyone for listening, and please share your feedback with us. We really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, and hope everyone has a great weekend.
Bye.